Facing the truth, discovering my fiancé's deception, just 2 weeks before our wedding and the consequences that follow. I really have to get this off my mind. I feel like I'm going crazy. For around 6 years, engaged for one, my fiancée Sarah and I have known each other. Our wedding is set for just 2 weeks, and I recently saw something that makes me feel as if I am making the worst mistake of my life. Sarah and I were using tonight a rare chance to unwind at home. While I was out back working on one of my projects, Sarah was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Anyway, as you do when working hard, I became thirsty and returned home to grab a drink. There Sarah was at the counter cooking supper and speaking on speakerphone. The voice caught me right away as Marty, my brother-in-law. This is now where my thinking goes completely distorted. Having been attempting to get in touch with her and she is not responding texts, Marty questioned Sarah where her sister, Evelyn, is. She just left here. She should be home in a half hour or so, Sarah says to him. It should be mentioned that Evelyn is the 5-year-old wife of Marty. I have to admit that I went into the kitchen, got a glass and asked Sarah, what was that all about? Not right once registering what she had just said. She said, Marty was looking for Evie. Seeing her texting, I inquired, what are you doing? She says, I'm texting Evie that Marty was looking for her. Still, I pour myself a drink, settle down, sip and then at last my brain kicks in. First of all, I heard Sarah tell Marty Evelyn was here. Evelyn was not here. The last time we saw her was yesterday when she visited to work on some last-minute wedding decoration with Sarah. Second, when I clearly heard Marty mention Evelyn wasn't responding to her texts, why is she texting Evelyn expecting a response? Finally, unless she either knows where she is or right now in front of me, texting her to tell her to get her butt home fast, why the hell would she tell Marty that Evelyn should be back in 30 minutes? My only conclusion is that Sarah is presumably alerting Evie that Marty would expect her home in half an hour and is lying to Marty about the location of her sister. Then I spent probably the next 5 hours creating several theories explaining this behavior. Some decent, some absolutely terrible. And running them back in my thoughts. Though I wanted very badly to ask Sarah about this, I doubted I would get a straight response if what I believe to be happening is indeed happening. Which gets me roughly 1 hour ago. About 1 in the morning, I got up to use the loo and found myself driven to check Sarah's phone. Knowing each other's pins, this wasn't a challenging task for us. Still, I took the phone, went to the restroom, unlocked it, and yep, exactly what I was terrified of and most likely what most of you were hoping for. For approximately 6 months, Sarah's sister Evelyn has been having an affair with a coworker. Sarah has been helping Evelyn hide it for practically that whole period. Between them, there are literally hundreds of books covering sex, the coworker, even quite embarrassing topics about my brother-in-law, just stuff that makes my stomach turn. And here is my soon-to-be bride following all of it without questioning. I grabbed some screenshots of the whole thread, put the phone back where I discovered it and then withdrew to my home office to find myself here blogging it all out on Reddit just so I can avoid the primal scream that wants to come out of my mouth right now. I am exactly 100% screwed, Reddit. I just cannot do it. I cannot marry Sarah. Regarding helping her sister in this affair and victimizing not just Marty but also their 2-year-old kid, I cannot conceive of any logical justification she could present me. On the other hand, my family, Sarah, her family, and I have all invested a lot of money into a wedding scheduled for about 2 weeks. We are not receiving any of that money returned. On top of that, I feel completely dumb. How could I have missed knowing this woman was this way? And just what the devil am I going to do? I most definitely cannot marry her. Still, I still wish. She is gorgeous, laid back, compassionate, and I felt our future was bright. She never wronged me, but I just cannot view her the same today. It like a large black blot on a lovely image. I'm genuinely dreading doing what I know I need to do. I simply don't know how the heck I got this so wrong. I wish I could break something or throw up. Edit. Guys, you clearly don't need to persuade me not to wed Sarah. The wedding is off. I'm simply trying to decide what to do going forward and build the nerve to act. Though the expectations of everyone put a lot of pressure on me, I am not going to bow beneath it. Simply said, I'm not enjoying having to deal with the repercussions. I'm more than a little irate about finding myself in this position. Edit 2, it is 5 a.m. I'm running off a few hours of sleep and have work in 3 hours. I'm going to shower and head into work rather early to avoid stew on this. Sarah and stew are avoided. Thanks to the encouraging folks here and a huge raspberry to the dill holes who keep telling I should figure out whatever excellent reason my soon-to-be ex-fiancé had for this trash. Edit 3, I started working about 7. I started working on the Band-Aid because nobody was in the office and contacted my brother. Living in Australia, he was still up after putting his children to bed. Breaking the news to him about this was difficult since, although I know he has set aside a lot of money for flights for his family and himself to visit, to his credit, as an older brother, he didn't mention it once and simply supported me. He also raised a really important issue. He said, "You deal daily with liars and scammers in a job where this is expected. You are not to blame for seeking somewhere to visit where this is not a consideration." He was exactly right about it, and now I understand why I'm reacting so fiercely to Sarah's involvement in this dishonesty. He also made a brilliant suggestion. He planned to bring his family to Florida for some sightseeing and park visits. Well, the youngsters will now also be accompanied by their uncle. We were going to honeymoon there as well, thus it should be simple as we were going to meet them for some anyway. I'll just offer Sarah's ticket to either my sister or another family member and rebook things to be near his and his family. Though I have responded a few, I haven't had time to review everyone's remarks. Right now, I'm simply trying to divert myself until the day goes on enough where I can reach out to Marty by drinking cup after cup of coffee and attempting to make myself sick. Edit 4. Just performed morning stand-up. Having been here so early, my stomach is doing flip-flops from drinking around 2 pots of coffee. I absolutely cannot focus and concentrate. I'm just going to take a sick day, drive over to check if Marty is available since I feel like I can't really anything from my end until I tell him what I know. If not, I will find him down and phone him. Evelyn works a 9 to 5 like me, hence chances are excellent this works out. Marty is a teacher on break right now. Wish Reddit luck. Edit 5. Arrived at Marty's residence somewhat after 10 a.m. We had a long, really nasty conversation in the kitchen after he had just dropped his daughter off for a nap. He guessed this for a few months essentially, but Evelyn has been rather successful at covering her traces, clearly with Sarah's help and a few of their mutual pals. I regretfully only have a few hundred screenshots from Sarah's phone, not all 6 months of text chats, but I provided him what I have and offered to assist him though I could. I know a few things and a few people since I'm a field analyst in the CU department of a mid-sized insurer specialized in workers' compensation fraud. Still, I am trying to save anything I can from my laptop in the almost brother-in-law's kitchen. Knowing I won't screw Marty over, I have to talk to Sarah tonight and get the word out as soon as I can to my friends and family now. Although our airline has a surname restriction for name changes, I managed to rebook most of the honeymoon thus far. Sarah was flying under her maiden name, thus I had trouble with the ticket. Still, they let me cancel and obtain a partial refund and rebook for my sister, who will be traveling to Florida with 2 brothers and nieces in a few weeks. I absolutely will be letting my family and friends know this afternoon sometime and beg them to keep it close, but I am delaying canceling the venues until after I talk to Sarah since I don't want to tip anyone off until Marty gets his chance to confront Evelyn. Right now I'm essentially in a frenzy, canceling whatever I can cancel, and I'm heading down to the bank in a few to open a new account and pay my payments and straighten my money. Though some have highlighted them, it should be really decent. Since we were not married, the mortgage is in my name. Although Sarah did contribute roughly $20,000 against my $60,000 down payment, I have more income. Though it could be worse, I will most likely have to pay her out that money and a portion of the mortgage payments for the last 16 months. Update was sent as an edit right on the same post. Right now it's about 8:30 p.m. I'm writing from my friend's place. Mark is his name. He used to be a co-worker of mine in the same line of business. As I indicated in a prior update, I work for a respectable-sized insurance carrier's CU department as a field analyst. For those uninitiated, I essentially work as a private investigator. My task is to look at what we believe to be bogus workers' compensation claims. Anyway, as I sort of hinted at, Marty wanted me to help him identify the other man Evelyn was seeing for adultery. We had only a name, let us call him Jake. The first thing I did was not some significant amount of investigating. It was essentially simply looking through LinkedIn, attempting to discover the guy using Evelyn's contacts, but it turned up nothing, which I thought odd. According to Marty, Evelyn claimed she wouldn't be home until perhaps 9 or 10 and that she was meant to be out for drinks tonight following work. I basically understood straight immediately, so he didn't have to explain what he suspected. I told him I would assist him, but he had to come with me. After that, I called my friend Mark, let him know about the circumstances, and asked him to meet us later in the day. Driving over to Marty's parents' house so they could see their granddaughter came first. I waited in the car and have no idea what Marty said them. We next headed to Evelyn's place of employment. One of those big commercial strip malls, it features a sizable non-gated parking park and all of these bland offices in a row. We drove till we came at Evelyn's car, then using the second set of keys, I had Marty unlock it. I next handed Marty a GPS tracker to put in the car and a voice-activated recorder. Once finished with that, We went, parked somewhat down the street, and watched for Evelyn to leave the company and for my friend to arrive. About 20 minutes later, Mark arrived, climbed in the car with us, and about an hour later Evelyn emerged from her workplace carrying two of her pals along with a tall, younger-looking man with sandy blonde hair. Clearly holding hands, I thought, "Damn, Evelyn, you're making it easy for me." After a few shots from the car, I waited for Evelyn to leave in hers and began following her. She didn't go straight to a motel or anything, first thinking she may. Rather, she drove to a reasonably good pub and grill in a pleasant area of town and parked on the street. I drove by her as she got out of her car and into the building, then located my own parking space and headed over to the factory. We first dispatched Mark since nobody knew him. He essentially had two jobs. First, try to find any compromising photos of Evelyn and Jake. Second, provide my alibi. After about 20 minutes in the car, Marty and I received the first in Mark's series of text messages. These images show Evelyn and Jake making out in front of their two female colleagues. Captured. Marty's misgivings were correct. They were enabling Evelyn to keep the affair from him. He was clearly really agitated and offended. One of the colleagues apparently is married, and as a couple they get along well with Marty and Evelyn, both of whom have children around the same age. When I asked Marty whether it was sufficient for him, he stated he still genuinely wanted to know who this guy was. We could find out later, I tried to tell him, but at this point he was nearly begging me, so I begged him to wait, texted Mark that I was on my way, and then I went inside the pub myself. Evelyn and her gang were laughing and drinking at one of those big circular tables close to the front window. First thing I saw. I halted as I came in, acted to be startled, then yelled out to Evelyn, "Hi, you're doing here?" Clearly startled to see me, everyone surrounding her stiffened up right away. Evelyn stated we were being married in 2 weeks and fast introduced me as her sister's fiancé. Everyone was congratulating each other really extensively. I thanked them and then reached out my hand to the blonde man, introduced myself using my entire name, thinking he would react in same manner. He did. I was a little surprised since he wasn't named Jake. I greeted everyone else and then told Evelyn I was going to see a coworker. I waved to Mark, then excused myself. Once I walked over to Mark, I told him the guy's name. We both grabbed our phones and headed to work. We located him not too long ago. He has social media profiles and a few court case rulings against him. When we learned Jake was his middle name, everything almost came together. At this point, I'm basically happy Evelyn isn't cheating on Marty with two other colleagues. Jake is 26, married, and has a 1-year-old daughter, turns out. This simply gets better and better. Anyway, I instructed Marty to wait a few more minutes after texting him the guy's name and decided I wanted to challenge myself. I was essentially watching over children here at the bar. I could see out of the corner of my eye that nobody was especially delighted about this, and my presence was seriously hurting the evening. I was clearly visible to Evelyn and her crew. Excellent. About 10 minutes later, I informed Marty to text Evelyn saying he was spending the night at his parents' house with their daughter. Not long after that, I found Evelyn pulling out her phone to show Jake, then everyone decided to pack up. Good night. Evelyn came over to me and asked whether Sarah and I wanted to visit for dinner this weekend. I grinned and wished her and her colleagues a happy night. That sounded like a terrific idea. After Mark and I paid our payment and ran back to the waiting Marty, we watched them go. Here there was some uncertainty since we were unsure of Evelyn's actual behavior. I had thought she might have already reserved a hotel room and was on her way, which would have greatly reduced my options and complicated everything. It turns out though, that tonight was most likely meant to be just drinks at the bar. It wasn't until Marty chose to spend the evening at his parents' house that it became anything more. Evelyn headed straight home, and we trailed behind her, parking down the street and keeping out of sight. Not long after that, another car drew into Marty's driveway. We watched Jake get out, approach the door, knock and be met by Evelyn. They entered together. At this moment it's roughly 7:30, and tonight I have personal business to attend to. As a friend, I believe I have done rather nearly all I could have for Marty. He can manage the remainder alone. I mean, I feel awful for the guy, absolutely, but I don't want to participate in this drama any more than I already do. Given my circumstances, it seems excessive for me to be the wingman for him facing his cheating wife. Marty says it's good, he will do the rest himself. Evelyn, perhaps he is more of a man than you could have imagined. He visits Evelyn's automobile, picks my equipment, and we say farewell. That was practically 2 hours ago. My phone hasn't been blowing, hence I'm not sure what's going on with Evelyn. I did get one text message from Marty indicating it was done and he was heading to his parents' place for real this time. Ever then, I have been at Mark's. That sums up my role in Marty's narrative essentially. He entered the house recording with his phone if he was wise and followed my counsel. Later on I will find out. Still, my first focus is getting home to tell Sarah the wedding is off. She almost certainly will take it poorly, there is no way she won't. But as I mentioned, right now I simply cannot get married to her. Though I'm not sure what the future holds for us or whether we will live with each other or not, most definitely we are not getting married anytime soon. For those who keep repeating, why didn't you speak with her first? Why did you not face her? Are you folks dumb, I have to ask? She stone cold lied in front of her brother-in-law, whom she has known for roughly 10 years and allegedly believes to be a truly wonderful husband and father. I'm not wired that way. Maybe you are foolish enough to believe that someone can lie that ruthlessly to someone they should care about and then give you the truth. I never had cause to doubt Sarah or not trust her until that point. She was physically unreliable in front of my face and I should let it go or expect her to be honest with me. You probably have no idea what it's like to have your whole perspective of someone change suddenly. It's confusing and, quite honestly, a little panic-inducing. Since it brought me to the truth, I'm actually surprised I kept my head and followed my instincts instead of rushing her right away. If she had lied to me and then deleted those text messages, I would never have read the terrible things she said, never seen how crafty and two-faced she could be, and never learned how little I really knew about her. It would have been shockingly simple for her to lie to me and then erase those texts. I'm headed home to chat to Sarah. I will notify everyone later with the official result. Not expecting it to be a nice one. Here's still another update for you folks. I suppose there is plenty to cover and that much has transpired. If I'm honest, most of it hasn't been that outstanding. Actually, it has been quite shoddy, but I will get to that. I started off somewhat late that evening leaving Mark's residence. Though she had no idea the company was really her sister's affair, Sarah already knew I was out talking business with him. Still, it was approaching an irrational hour partly because I was trying to muster the strength to go home and confront her. Following 2 or 3 pep talks from Mark, I finally got off my keister, texted Sarah that I was heading home, and drove away. As I mentioned in the last report, I was really taken aback when I arrived since Evelyn was sobbing on the couch with Sarah when I stepped into the house. This was most likely the last thing I expected since Evelyn's car had disappeared from the driveway when I returned home. I stopped momentarily and almost spun around and left. I thought Evelyn's presence would make a terrible scenario a million times worse, so this was not how I expected this to be going down. Still, I had plans for which I wished to advance. The symbolic clock was running in the back of my mind. I had friends to tell and wedding plans to cancel. Both Sarah and Evelyn glanced up at me in thanks when I walked into the room, but the litany of charges never materialized. I just looked back, questioning my eyes. The moment passed. Evelyn returned to crying. Sarah returned to consoling, and I let the awkward half-minute hang in the air as I considered. Marty seemed to have neglected mentioning my help with Evelyn's affairs discovery. Not for any other purpose than to watch how Sarah responded, I chose to play dumb. I settled on a reclining chair, dropped my laptop bag, and pulled my phone from my pocket. I pretended to be fidgety with it, then asked them, "What's going on?" Evelyn simply kept crying, but Sarah turned to look at me and said, "Marty is divorcing Evie." Well, certainly, I figured as much. I chose to forward with the obvious inquiry. "What for?" I said to her. Sarah looked at me and stopped massaging Evelyn's back momentarily. Her face seemed to twist and distort practically. Imagine the look a 5-year-old produces when you order them to finish their lima beans or eat their broccoli. Evelyn looked at Sarah a way I wouldn't have known from a sister, and there was a pregnant silence until Sarah blurted, "She cheated on him." Now, I have to admit, this answer really stunned me. I had definitely not expected this. Indeed, the more cynical readers here could believe that, well, the cat was out of the bag, so there's no point in hiding it. And indeed, that is accurate. She could have, however, equally easily pretended to be ignorant or perhaps phrased it another way. Like Marty accused Evie of cheating, instead of essentially verifying it to my face. Though it's part of my job to pay attention to not only what people say but also how they say it, so maybe I'm being pedantic here. Evelyn wasn't happy about this. She sort of sank into the couch a little and performed this unusual simultaneous sigh and sob. I must have stammered a little, but I wanted to keep on and head for the gold, sort of speaking. Sarah most likely saw it as shock, and although she would have been right in a sense, just not in the way she would have anticipated. "Do you know?" Sarah nodded, her hand still massaging her sister's shoulder. She said nothing. Not slow, I asked the clear follow-up. "How long?" 6 months came back far more readily than I had anticipated. Her easy admission to it startled me. Evelyn was startled as well. She smacked her sister's hand off her, and I believe even Sarah was slightly startled to say it aloud. Leaning back in the recliner, I got ready to pull the rest of the Band-Aid clear. "We aren't planning to get married." From both sisters, there were two looks like surprised goats and a chorus of what? Rising, I repeated myself. We're not getting married. Not for 6 months especially. I cannot wed someone who would hide infidelity. Sarah jumped off the couch and opened her arms. The body language screamed, "You can't be serious." But I merely put my palms in front of myself. I take this seriously. Not little, I dislike this. I can't get married to you with way I feel, and I dislike that you participated in this. One would make a mistake here. The waterworks began right away, and even Evelyn performed the perch-like mouth action meant to be sucking air. Wails from Sarah, claims of not loving her, appeals to my sense of obligation, lost money, trouble for all our friends, humiliation of it all. Though it was really nothing I hadn't considered, hearing Sarah express it through agonizing sobbing felt quite different. I responded, "Look, I already canceled the honeymoon." Trying to persuade Sarah of the finality of it all. Well, maybe not, since I have no idea how long Marty would have kept my involvement in everything off the books. Not happening is what I'm saying here. The second it left my mouth, I realized it was a bomb, and the explosion was almost instantaneous. To her credit, Evelyn had always been really fast on the pickup, which most likely helped her fool her husband for so long. When she combined my look at the bar earlier in the evening with her awareness, I could almost see the realization setting in on her. She yelled, "You son of a expletive," and shot across the room at me. Though I'm not a big man now and I'm not slouch either, the power Evelyn threw at me caused me to lurch backward. I hardly had time to grab my hands before her finger-based raking of my face began. I nearly dropped the phone I still had in hand, but I pushed her away and yelled very loudly, "Evelyn, get off me! Sarah, get your sister in line!" Evelyn sprang for me once more, but shockingly Sarah wrapped her arms around her sister's waist and kept her in place as asked. Holding my phone up for emphasis, I exclaimed, "Get out of here right now, or I am calling the police," at Evelyn. Sarah urged us both to cool off. She doesn't have anywhere to go right now," she told me, and Marty took her car keys. That explained the empty driveway automobile, but it didn't really matter. With Evelyn, I was 100% through and I wanted to make sure she knew it. I marched into my house office, slammed the door, and called the police. I said I had locked myself in my office, had been attacked by the sister of my fiancé, and that I was bleeding from my face. My vision was fuzzy and Evelyn had scraped me really nicely around the inside of my left eye. I was afraid for my life. I even informed them I had on my phone the whole fight captured. Sarah knocked on the door just as I was wrapping out my call through. Kindly leave. We have to discuss this. Kindly, I love you. Please, do not do this. We have no need of doing this. Even Evelyn wants to apologize. She feels guilty. Though Sarah was clearly losing her expletive, I'm rather confident last one was a lie. I ignored her, and her attempts to cajole me from the office stopped most likely just as the cops arrived at our front door. I decided to come out when I heard Sarah chatting to them. 2 men made up the cops. One of them appeared younger than me, perhaps around Sarah's age, and the other one appeared older and more irritated about life in general. I said hello, pointed at Evelyn, said she attacked me, and volunteered to show the cops the tape I recorded. The younger one questioned whether I intended to file charges. I agreed. Once more, he asked me whether I intended to file charges. Again, I answered yes. Both police glanced at each other at this time. Before the young cop could open his mouth once more, I exclaimed, "Yes, damned it, I want to press charges. I have video proof, this is going to court. Else, I'm going to ask your supervisor to come down and handle it personally." Not that we are buddies or anything, but given my line of work, I spend plenty of time engaging with local law enforcement, and I have seen most of the brass or spoken with them on the phone a couple of times in the last several years. I think they were really shocked that I recognized his name. To be honest, I was starting to get really hot under the collar at this point. Although I could see what these men were thinking, I absolutely disagree with it. Facts are what they are. Facts. Yes, I might not be bleeding on the floor, but Evelyn attacked me in my own house and I wanted her gone. Fortunately, the matter did not quickly get out of hand. The 2 cops detained Evelyn and placed her in the rear of the police car. She was weeping and squealing all the entire time, like some kind of gibbering crazy. Sarah wasn't any better. She merely kept repeating, "No, please no," again and over. The younger cop rounded around at this moment to ask whether everything was fine here. I simply let them know I was heading to bed. Again, he asked Sarah. She didn't reply right away, so he inquired, "Is everything okay here, ma'am?" By now he was clearly searching for something. Though I hated this man, I bit my lip. Sarah only nodded at the cop when she at last realized he was addressing her. Clearly unhappy with this, the man began to ask her once more. At which point I interrupt, if you want to go on a fishing expedition, you might want to do it over there on the lawn where my doorbell camera isn't recording you. By now I had pushed my luck with this man one too many times, but what could I do? I believe I was most likely around 30 seconds from having the cuffs slapped on me until his teammate arrived and essentially drew him away. Presumably in his late 50s, he was an elderly man who most likely didn't want to handle 2 arrests straight at the start of his shift, particularly given one of them clearly would be more hassle than it would be worth. He most certainly guided him out of it, and they left carrying Evelyn away and hopefully permanently out of my life. By now I'm considering whether or not I want to remain here. My parents reside a few hours away, and considering how poor I will be in the near future, ruled out either their apartment or a hotel, so I just chose to sleep in the guest room. I told Sarah we would talk tomorrow, that I was sleepy and didn't want to be bothered. She made some fruitless attempts to persuade me to interact with her in conversation or sleep in our bed. She let me alone, thankfully, and I crashed harder than I had in years. Which basically puts us up to current with the most recent upgrade. But, dear Reddit friends, let me tell you this, the next day was most certainly the strangest effing day of my life. I first got up at 11 a.m. Sarah had cleaned the house from top to bottom. She was still home. I mean, the floor gleamed, the toilet shone. I could lick the bathroom's linoleum and it would have most likely been minty fresh. She clearly had been busy, but when she noticed me she sort of hovered out of direct range, not exactly interesting but seeming like she wanted to say something. I understand. Last night was horrible for everyone and she was most likely unsure. Did I just call off the wedding right in the middle of things? Was I treating this seriously? Was I genuinely furious? Breathing deeply, I told her we had to stop our conversation. I considered rebuffing her when she tried to seat next to me on the couch, but I didn't. We were not getting married, so I didn't have to act like I disliked her since, honestly, I didn't. Though I was mildly appalled by some of the things I had read in her text interactions with her sister, I was disappointed in her. Yet, we were both hurting here and I didn't want to make it any more complicated than it already was. For Sarah to really and completely believe the wedding was off, I had some more convincing work. She was not responding well, that is, understated. She was absolutely wrecked. She was, I believe, occasionally hyperventilating. Though clearly not only was this my idea, but I had also had more time to come to terms with it. I was keeping it together better. She finally addressed the important question. What about us? People are going to hate me a lot for this, especially the kind of Redditors who believe any transgression in a relationship qualifies for nuking from orbit. One could even argue that my calling off the wedding resembled throwing a Moab over our 6-year marriage. Actually though, I had no response for Sarah at that very moment. I told her so. I just didn't know. I claimed I read all those text messages and it revealed a side of her I didn't know existed, and that I wasn't sure about her or our relationship anymore. I replied I couldn't understand why she would go along with Evelyn, discounting Marty and participating in, even egging her on, and cheating on not only him but also their daughter too. I know, it was wrong, I know, she said repeatedly. She couldn't offer an explanation when I asked her for one. She merely stated she had to pick her sister and that she got carried away. I told her I considered a good sister to be someone who kept you on the straight and narrow and refused to grant a free pass allowing you to be a douchebag. She agreed with me and claimed she would try better, but Evelyn had always been the boss when they were little and she was always the follower. I get this. I have an older sibling as well, and although I live somewhat more independently, I spent the previous 18 years of my life living on the other side of the earth with him except for the rare trip around Thanksgiving or Christmas. Still, maybe I had a leg up on Sarah since Evelyn was a piece of garbage while my older brother was a great man. Here is where I experienced my second significant effing shock of life in like 48 hours. To me, Sarah adds, it's not fair, it's unfair. What is not fair? I sought her. I got over it since you were sexting that bimbo wife Mandy lady on Instagram last year. Though I was harmed, I overcame it. Why cannot you move past this? Why huh? Where? What the devil is she talking about? Mandy, the bimbo wife. Is who? Like, I have no effing clue. I questioned her whether she had a psychotic break or was high. Alright, that was harsh of me, but I have not been cybersexing or sexting anyone, particularly not some Instagram girl. At this point, I'm objecting very loudly. Sarah is yelling at me through her tears, saying she saw the letters last year and chose not to confront me since I had stopped. She apparently had been looking at my social media from my house computer while I was at work, which should have been quite dull given I only have family and a few work colleagues on there. She's just calling me a liar and a pervert and all kinds of expletive So I try to make this case to her, offering to let her log into all my accounts and check for herself. Things are spiraling out of control and she begins throwing objects at me. I warn her that, should she toss one more item, I will have her removed from this house exactly like her sister. She stomps off to the master bedroom and shuts the door, swears at me. At this point, I am so damned perplexed I hardly know what to think. I power up my desktop, head into my office, and Google bimbo wife Mandy. Indeed, there is an Instagram, a Twitter, a Reddit, even OnlyFans. When I click on one of the Instagram links, a picture of a really curvaceous woman, like obviously stretching the boundaries of science and technology, comes up. And no, try to guess her country, Australia. Everyone, keep in mind all the great things I spoke regarding my brother, who was lodging with us last Christmas, all the way from Australia. Guess who I mentioned? Sure, go ahead and use my office computer to play games if you have jet lag. Based on what I know, my brother signed into either Instagram or anything else after his wife and children went to sleep and most likely paid money to sext with this girl. What fantastic effing man you are. Now I would want to contact my brother and not only confirm my suspicions but also give him a goddamn earful. However, it's like 2 or 3 in the morning. It will have to wait. I am, however, crawling the walls here trying to figure out my feelings about everything. Everyone really lets me down. Damn, what is this planet coming to? I ask myself. Try as I might, it doesn't really come together for a fleeting instant as I try to link whatever the heck Sarah watched my brother do with what she done with Evelyn. She didn't confront me when she saw this. Maybe she's a more forgiving or tolerant person than I am, thus I wish she had. It would have given me a chance to even demonstrate her how I would behave and to straightforwardly explain her my full personal opinion on these matters. I'm not sure whether it would have affected her later on in a positive or negative manner. All I know is that this piece is turning into a novel and I blew off most of the morning when I ought to be getting this out of my thoughts and onto this page. Although I feel better for doing it, there are still most likely 2 to 3 posts to write. I'm not going to upload them to this subreddit longer. I'm not sure they would let me. But, I will try to gently update my profile in the next day or 2 with the rest of the blowout, talking to my brother, talking to my parents and Sarah's parents, and last, where Sarah and I stand. One thing I can say though is that for a variety of reasons most of my direct family ties tend to be somewhat strained. Although my parents are mostly encouraging, as the reality of the financial loss sets in, their support is waning. Indeed, the marriage is still off. From the beginning, that was rather almost guaranteed. Sarah's parents seem a little more agitated. I'm sure they are inserting pins and voodoo dolls made right now in my likeness. For those curious, Evelyn is out of jail. She got Sarah to bail her out, and I even slammed on Sarah for that, labeling her her sister's underling, which I believe really resonated with her as she sent me a 20-page letter about how her sister always dominated her over her whole life. Having read it twice, I wish we had discussed this almost anywhere throughout the past 6 years. Perhaps things would be different. Not clear. Anyway, read it. If anyone is still interested, expect a last chapter of this tale in a day or 2 and maybe a follow-up when the former wedding date passes. This update has taken more time to arrive at than I had first planned. Many things have kept me somewhat busy over the past few days. It wasn't until today, when I had some free time following lunch, that I could sit down and get this out. I'll aim to get through as much as I can. But before that, let me mention a few things in response to last post comments. I shall attempt to be succinct. First of all, aside from what I know, Marty is still divorcing her. I know not much else about what is happening with his divorce. Clearly, nothing including paperwork exists, but the purpose is evident. Apart from that, I'm not particularly in a position to be supporting any kind of course of action Marty should follow, provide him legal counsel, or help him in doing anything to the other man or tracking out the other man's wife, etc. Growing-ass dude Marty can do with the circumstances whatever he wants. As his friend, my role is only to assist him and provide guidance should he so seek. Second, this is not some kind of guerrilla marketing for an OnlyFans female. If it was, I should have posted it on the initial post, which was seen by nearly 3 million people in first page of Reddit. Given that this post became somewhat famous on Reddit, it's not really surprising that bimbo wife Mandy, another Redditor, happened to be following the narrative and spotted her name. It might have easily been any other of the hundreds and hundreds of girls using Reddit to share their photos. And briefly speaking of Mandy, I have in fact chatted with her. She looks personally really friendly, and she was really extremely helpful in verifying stuff for me. But guys, Mandy is married, clearly quite happily, for almost 2 decades. There are no romance plans here going forward. And honestly, genuinely, her husband must be cool with it. Nevertheless, she is far too much for a simple insurance guy like me to handle. With that all out of the way therefore, on to the update. Last time I wrote, I concluded it believing my brother had chatted with Mandy using my office computer, but it was too late for me to get in touch with him. Among those guys are individuals who, once presented with a challenge, have to be actively working on solutions. This is fantastic for my line of work, but in circumstances like this all I was doing was driving myself crazy. I thus made the decision to inhale deeply, wait till later and go on with what I had to accomplish, leaving everything aside. First thing first was trying to get every person from my side who I had invited to the wedding notified of its cancellation. As you may remember, I had previously told my parents and had them call my relatives on the day I made up my mind. Only Sarah and I know the full guest list, thus I had to do the rest alone. Respect for my friends drove me to choose to call rather than text, but this might have been a bad choice since every phone call usually led to a very long justification of why I was postponing the wedding. Though I could have offered some other explanation, I wanted people to know that I wasn't being lazy or perhaps having cold feet, something inane. Not just for my personal reputation, but also in order to honor the people who had pledged to demonstrate support for Sarah and me that day. This meant it was now dawn time in Australia since I just managed to get in with everyone late in the evening. Though I knew what I had to do, I wanted to be sure my ducks were all in line, so I paused in the kitchen to make a sandwich. Sarah wasn't home, I noted. When she departed and settled down to eat and consider what to do about my brother's predicament, I had no idea. For simplicity here, let's name my brother Carl. Carl and I have always been really close even though he is 13 years older than me. In my life, he was this kind of quasi-parental agent as he was already well on his way to become an adult by the time I could have long-term memory. He was always kind with his time, played with his younger brother when other teenagers would most likely have avoided such an activity like the plague, and generally seemed to me growing up to be rather mature and wise. Simply said, I really respected him. I was still getting used to the concept that he had been sexting a female not his wife in my house, and I had to make decisions. Talking to him about it was clear-cut, but at this point I didn't know if I cared about having him confess only to clear my name considering how shoddy my relationship with Sarah was. Anything may be saved though? For minimum propriety at least, I had to holler at him about this and persuade him to stop. I wasn't sure though, if I should tell my sister-in-law about it or not rat him out. Everything rested on what he said me and whether or not I trusted him. After eating, I got onto Facebook and video phoned Carl. Carl is nearly always available during the day and now works largely from home as a remote office worker since his expertise is IT. And today was exactly the same. It hardly rang more than once or twice before his response. We greeted one another, exchanged some niceties, and then I just sort of jumped into it and asked him whether he had been using my computer to sex chat with ladies on the internet when he was visiting me. Carl's expression froze, and he bent over the camera's out-of-frame view, clearly closing his office door. Definitely yes, I did. Ask me why? He asked me. Under my breath, I swore and told Carl Sarah had believed his flirting was me since he used my computer. I told him I wasn't glad to pay the hit for him, and I questioned him straightforwardly whether Karen knew about this or not. He hesitated for a few seconds, stammered over his words, then looked a little ashamed and answered, "No, Karen didn't know. He would want it kept that way." He continued by saying that, mostly in the bedroom department, their relationship had been very difficult since their youngest was born 4 years earlier. Carl had always been a quite reserved guy, particularly in terms of personal details. At least he had always been that way when he was chatting to his much younger baby brother. But this time he merely let it all fall out. Things had been horrible. Karen was always exhausted no matter what he did or how much he helped around the house. He had been bored of being turned down. Eventually, this resulted on issues on his side. Some type of performance anxiety on the few times Karen would actually feel up for some bedroom fun, and things just grew worse from there. Basically, there's no amount of socks picked up, laundry folded, dishes washed, or time spent minding children that would get me laid. It was just not happening, he stated. So I started to spend time in my office at night working. He even used the finger quotes to convey this. Apparently, his working at night became a quite strong addiction to OnlyFans sites, which swiftly spiraled out of hand given the relative privacy he enjoyed at his office for legitimate work. When I asked him whether he was still doing it, he swore up and down saying he wasn't. When he said it, I thought I believed him. He seemed to be honest, but I just got this niggling sensation in the back of my mind that something was wrong. Perhaps it was because of all the dishonesty I experienced lately, but I was questioning my own brother, who has been a stand-up person to me our entire life. Being in this state truly disgusted me. The challenge I now encountered here was somewhat sophisticated. First, I would have to have my brother inform Sarah that it was him all along if I wanted my name cleared. But if he did that, Then there was no assurance Sarah wouldn't angrily tell Karen. Though at the same time I didn't know if I felt comfortable perhaps throwing a nuclear on my brother's marriage over something he not only stated he stopped. Personally, I thought it would be better if Karen knew. This sort of moral gray area is what I find. Though I didn't know exactly what to do, I urged him to notify his wife about this and start marriage counseling. They had been coming for the past 6 months, he added, and while it was beneficial, receiving a prescription for some generic Viagra had truly helped him. I really took at that, carefully misting my computer screen with water. He told me they had been attempting to schedule at least a couple of times a week intimate time, and the Viagra had helped him overcome performance anxiety to the point where now they were both looking forward to time with each other after the kids went to bed. Everything was basically, hey, this is actually going in the right direction now, please don't screw this up for us. Not only for the benefit of Carl and Karen, but also for my 2 nieces, I truly did not want to be in this position. And if what Carl was telling me was the truth, I could be hurling a firebomb into a relationship that was beginning to heal. It was uncertain what would happen. Indeed, some people would find it disappointing, but at the moment I felt waiting and seeing was the best choice I had. After all, I was going to see him in a few weeks in person, and once I got him alone in a room and a few beers into him, I was going to most certainly find the truth of this. Still, it appeared to be the best line of action any. I got in early that evening. I saw Sarah just the following morning. She seemed sloppish, as though she slept very little. Mostly out of habit after all we had been together for almost 6 years, I asked her where she had been. She informed me she had drove Evelyn to her parents' place and stayed overnight following her down to the courthouse for her arraignment to post bail. She brought up how terrible it was to have to inform her parents I had called off the wedding. She shouted, "Of course they do," when I asked her if her parents knew the cause. Though by now I was losing it, I attempted to keep cool. Bit back at her, "Are you going to move back there so that they have both girls at home now?" Though it was small and insignificant, her bail of Evelyn from jail infuriated me to no end. She urged, "You don't need to be an ass about this." And I responded, "And you don't need to be Evelyn's FC King underling." When I told Sarah that, I could see her clearly withering. Clearly it had connected with people. Her eyes began to tear at the corners, and I tempered my temper. We basically stood miles apart in our house's living room and said nothing for a good solid minute or two before Sarah decided to keep on chatting. "Our parents are coming here at 3. I really faced palmed at this. Just my own ego, I was about to leave on her without consulting her on this. After all, I did have to meet down with them and hash out the specifics of the wedding and whatever remaining deposit we had, and at least once personally explain to everyone why it wasn't happening. Good, let's do this and clear things out. I tried to keep busy, but on a Sunday there isn't much you can do but waste time. Time wasting isn't very fun when you know you're going into the meat grinder in a few hours. Still, 3 p.m. arrived as did our parents. Just 1 month after we closed the house, we all gathered around the big kitchen table Sarah had purchased. She loved it even though it was second-hand from Facebook Marketplace as it was solid oak with a lovely finish and fit for seats. She always wanted to have large dinner gatherings with our family over, just not like this. The next 3 hours were tortuous. Nobody should have been happy, none of them were. Unsurprisingly, my own parents were the best source of support I could find. Yet, even that was limited, basically in line with, well, it's his decision to make, which more or less implies, yeah, we think this is crazy too, but we're still backing him. To be honest, that was great with me. The stigma by connection of calling off the wedding did not need my parents to be obtained. With embracing it, I was good. We finally worked out a reasonable agreement on the wedding. We would try to retrieve whatever money we could, divide it back and then eat whatever losses there were shared together. When it came to the house though, Sarah fiercely disagreed with my suggestion of reimbursing her or her parents the deposit. She basically intended not to move. As you can guess, Sarah and I hadn't really discussed the SRS, same-sex relationship status, living together scenario in too great depth. She was startled when I even mentioned clearing the house equity since the message here is that I expect her to leave our house. She had a fit, I have no guilt about it. Before attempting to work with her parents on a payment schedule, I should have resolved our relationship status with her first. It definitely indicated to everyone how I felt about our relationship. And Sarah was beside herself. Even if I believe our parents expected it, or at least understood. She made it plain. I am not moving out of my house, and we are not breaking up, she said, clearly rejecting our splitting over this. And that's essentially how my Sunday night came to finish. Sarah and I tried to talk it out some more once our parents left, but we kept circling each other and I had to restrain my natural inclination to run her down until we found a solution. I wanted to switch off my thoughts since, truthfully, I was also rather exhausted. Unbelievably, we ended up just sitting on the couch watching a movie together until it was time to turn in for the night. We left it there with a, "We'll talk about it more tomorrow," and headed to our respective rooms. Monday morning I woke up to a sizable handwritten note shoved under the door from Sarah. I thought I would deal with it later after glancing quickly at the first few pages and headed to work. Sarah still laid in bed when I left. She had to have written that letter late. I started phoning suppliers and venues on my list at the office and set some appointments. It produced mixed bag of outcomes. Under the pretext that I had ordered most of the food, the catering crew insisted that I pay most of their rates. Over here, I shot back at them like, were they expecting me to eat a week-old steak? But my request went unheard. I tried explaining what happened to the woman running the catering company, but it appeared to further strengthen her will to extract as much money from me. By contrast, the DJ I engaged for the entertainment was quite friendly and returned practically all the money. Events proceeded as follows. And during the day, between calls and working, I perused Sarah's letter. This is 20 pages of written work now, hence I will just summarize. The essence of it was that Evelyn has bullied Sarah from infancy onward. Sarah's approach of handling this was to basically follow anything Evelyn wanted to hear. She continued, saying that she was simply terrified and that her life now operated in a kind of generic manner. Fear to upset the balance, create a disturbance, or occasionally even express a viewpoint. I considered this as, honestly, when I look back at our relationship with a more critical eye, I kind of feel that Sarah was a somewhat too perfect of a girlfriend. She never disagreed with me, never chose her plans over mine, or even fairly argued too forcefully against anything I wanted to undertake. She deliberately tried to be helpful and, generally speaking, behaved more or less like a yes-woman in our marriage. Until now, we had never even so much as had a mild debate in 6 years, let alone a full-fledged fight. From a relationship's position, everything sounds fantastic. Until naturally, it isn't. You know, what they call people-pleasing behavior. That is, this deep-seated insecurity and drive to make others happy. When I start looking at it this way, a lot of things make sense to me and I start to realize that despite being with Sarah for 6 years, I really don't know her that well. She seems to have presented this picture all around her, which is essentially a mirror reflecting whatever she believes others desire. In terms of our relationship, she has essentially been playing the ideal girlfriend but never actually letting me inside to see her personally. Hell, it's probably certainly simply another reflection, this time of Evelyn and all her warts and faults, therefore what I saw in those text conversations is not even the actual Sarah. This sounds strange, but it's as if we are in an unequal relationship whereby perhaps she loves me for who I am and how I present my ideas on my face and my heart on my sleeve. Perhaps though, I love her just for the mirror she is pointing up to my face. I'm right there as well, however I'm not sure if this sounds too metaphysical for you. I'm still attempting to grab by my fingertips this wisp of an idea. The letter Sarah sent me was the first actual insight into her upbringing that I had seen. All I know is that in the past few days, I have most likely learned more about her than I have in the past 6 years. That evening, we continued our conversation, more especially, regarding her behavior and background. Our final decision was that she requires assistance. Too afraid to offend anyone lest she face her sister's fury, her parents' censure, or the loss of love from the one she loves, she is a grown woman who is sadly trapped acting like a child. This is not how a relationship should be, so I can say that I feel far more confident and sure that my call-off of the wedding was the right one. Actually, it may not be any more accurate. After our conversation that evening, I went to bed far less tense than I had in a few days. I couldn't locate more, hence the story most likely finishes here. Thus remarked Pepe if you watch this long-ass video. After we announced my pregnancy, my sister-in-law's plan to humiliate me at my husband's party backfired, landing her in jail and a divorce. For the last 7 years, I, 29F, have been wed to Harry. Except for his relationship to his sister, Kayla, who brings all the negative into our life, I enjoy everything about our marriage. Now don't get me wrong, when I initially met Kayla, I loved her. But with time, I rapidly changed my view. She is poisonous, manipulative, and really negative. Knowing the kind of person she is, I have worked hard over years to be on her good side. My husband dated Syl's best friend when he was 17 in the past, but they subsequently broke up since he felt under pressure to be with her because of Syl. His sister said he and another friend of hers should be together when he turned 23 and discovered he was single, but he disagreed. She went crying to their parents about how she wanted him to wed someone she felt comfortable with, but his parents hardly really listened to her throughout their great battle. While my husband and I were meeting and falling in love, his parents were quite encouraging, but Syl always treated me coldly. She would always bring up Harry's exes for no apparent reason whenever I was present, reminding him of how well they were doing and suggesting how he could get in touch with them. This continued for some time. Harry also thought this strange and would ask her to stop bringing up his exes. I was not the only one who saw this. Then Sil would get enraged and start mocking me, claiming I was jealous and Harry shouldn't be with someone like me. Sil would deliberately invite one of Harry's exes whenever his parents would call us for supper, saying she had inadvertently come across them that day and had to ask them politely. She doesn't follow me, but she checks my Instagram constantly as well. Since I have a public account, I observed she is usually the first person to see my stories. Should a man comment on my photograph, she would then go to her brother and grumble over how I was sharing indecent images of myself. Harry and I would actually chuckle at her claims. She persuaded Harry to split off with me when he and I agreed to live together, telling him I had many defects as a woman and that she could find someone far better than him. Since I had been just friendly to her all along, this comment really wounded me. Sadly, Sil's treatment of me got even more bad as soon as Harry and I were engaged. Everyone started applauding Harry and me as we revealed our engagement, but I observed Kayla was somewhat quiet. Then, startled everyone, she sprang up from her chair and left our gathering. Later, she called Harry, sobbing and yelling about how she didn't value receiving the news with everyone else as she felt she was the closest to him and deserved to be the first one to know of his engagement. Later on, she messaged me nearly borderline threateningly, advising me on how I should treat her brother as she had always been the only female in his life. I nearly shuddered over the strange message. I left her message on scene, which I know must have offended her even more, not even bothered responding. Every time Sil saw me, she started to progressively ignore me. She stayed involved in all the wedding preparations for whatever reason, like when I went dress shopping and had my bridal shower. Though both my future mother-in-law and fiancé called her out on it several times, her criticism of the wedding reached a whole new level as she freely expressed her unhappiness with my decisions. Her actions persisted. One day, Kayla overheard me talking about the centerpiece with my future mother-in-law. She started to make fun of me right away, stating how my decision had no class and how this was why she wanted her brother to wed someone better. For me, that was the tipping point and I lost control. I made it plain to her that she was no longer invited to our wedding and yelled at her that I could not stand her continual taunting and criticism anymore. Shocked and gasping in surprise as if she had never expected me to challenge her, Kayla was infuriated even by my mother-in-law, who backed me. Later on, Kayla contacted Harry, moaning about how I embarrassed her and insisting he should control me since I would be his wife. Harry insisted strongly that he supported my choice and that she would not be invited to the wedding should she not atone. She grudgingly texted me a sincere apology. I saw it and, once more, left on read. I was already tired from getting ready for my wedding, and I wanted nothing to do with her drama. She did visit our wedding in the end since I wanted her to not criticize us afterward. Everyone, including the guests, seemed to have no issue following the pink tones and pastels chosen for my wedding. But Sil arrived looking as though she were attending a funeral, a black floor-length gown with a veil. To put it mildly, we were stunned. Sil visited everyone sharing her grief at losing her brother to another woman. My husband approached Sil about her discomfort with her wedding attire at the reception. Saying that she had the right to wear whatever she chose and that I was too domineering, she sought to portray the victim. When her non-stop scene-making persisted, my mother-in-law and father-in-law ultimately ordered her to leave. It was embarrassing for me. Ever since that day I avoid her. I forbade Sil anywhere near our kid when I delivered my son Nate. She tried to oppose it but my husband's parents had my back. They supported my choice and knew exactly why I wanted Sil far from my infant. Sil suffered a miscarriage with her then-boyfriend Jamie 2 years ago and it totally shattered her. For everyone, that was indeed a depressing period. Given our already childbearing status, Harry and I felt bad for her. We chose to be somewhat more lenient following her miscarriage. She could connect with our kid Nate, so we would welcome her to our house. Despite her behavior with me, she has been rather lovely to our son, really shocking. She looked to have changed at first, but with time she returned to her former self. She constantly talks about how difficult her life is, how things never seem to go for her, and blames ex-friends or managers for upsetting her life. I have found over time that she is never wrong in her thinking. She is always attempting to get people on her side by playing the victim card and hardly acknowledges any flaws in confrontations. She chose to get married this year and invited everyone to save us. Given our relationship seemed to have improved, Harry was surprised to learn we were not invited. She began to explain how she won't let me come since I would cause disturbance to her wedding when we questioned her about it. Having never done anything to her, I phoned and asked her why she would think something like that. Kayla began to tell how she had deliberately dressed in all black for our wedding, So now she was worried that I might do the same, and this was why she wanted me off-site. I informed my spouse straightforwardly about how manipulative she was, outraged about it. After discussing with his parents, Harry decided to let Sil know they would neither be attending the wedding nor would they pay for it. This turned Sil to tears, and she began to blame me for starting this disaster. Her husband told her she had no right to be pointing fingers at me as she had freely admitted her own error. Kayla, however, explained her behavior by stating that I should just get over it since our wedding was long ago. Later, she contacted me to apologize and ask for forgiveness as Phil and Mil were still not paying for her wedding. Though I hate to say it, Kayla can be quite charming and convincing when she wants something. I wanted to just go forward from the past and forgave her. Her wedding to Jamie went perfectly. We all showed up and had fun. Not even 6 months later, Kayla appeared at our door grumbling about her marriage failing. For a few days, Harry and I let her stay with us where she would spend endless hours venting about her husband. They appeared to be struggling to conceive, and Kayla was obviously blaming Jamie for everything. When I went to speak to Kayla, she insisted it was entirely her husband's responsibility. She would be hyper-focused on our lives and try to create things that didn't exist when she was not grumbling about her husband. For instance, usually every morning before heading to work I visit the gym. When I'm running late, I occasionally grab my work clothes so I may finish my workout, have a bath, and change into my business wear. Sael observed this for some time and would have many questions about it, including why I was bathing or why I even needed to visit the gym. I didn't give it much thought and would tell her how I liked keeping my weight and how I disliked visiting the office all sweaty. She would nod and lick her lips. Mil was telling us about a friend of hers who was divorcing right at lunch. She left her friend's spouse and grabbed half of his assets after learning about his adultery with her. Sael stopped her abruptly to ask my husband whether he and I had signed a prenup before we were married. We paused to stare at her. We stopped eating. She glanced at my husband expectantly as if I hadn't even arrived. My husband told her straightforwardly that he is not someone who minces his words, as he and I both made rather good money and we felt no need for a prenup. Sil snorted and began to say that he could be blindsided any day and that cheats abound today. Her statements offended me, therefore I asked her to clarify exactly what she meant. Sil then began to remark how I was obviously meeting someone as I was usually carrying change of clothing everywhere and that, as Harry's sister, it was her obligation to warn her brother. These were shocking remarks for me. Phil and Mil arrived right away to save her from continuing to fabricate such things and advised she shouldn't interfere with others' affairs. Without missing a beat, Sil continued to emphasize how she was only trying to be there for her brother and began to joke if our son Nate was indeed Harry's son since he didn't quite look like him. I swear I watched the redness of wrath on my husband's face. In my life, I never had seen him this enraged. Looking Kayla squarely in the eye, he informed her that she was not a mother yet, as she did not deserve to be one, and that her child would be better off in paradise than with someone like her. Kayla's lips hung in stunned disbelief. Mil and Phil simply watched silently as my husband left Kayla complaining about her being a shameless person trying to ruin everything since her life had nothing to offer. She was merely a loser, he informed her, doing nothing all day while her husband worked nonstop. He kept saying that since she was plainly projecting, she should focus on her own marriage instead of pointing fingers at me and asking about prenups. Reduced to tears, Kayla began to wail. Expecting comfort, she turned to Jamie, seated just next to her, but he never spoke. My husband never has this kind of mental collapse. She eventually got up from her chair and dashed into the toilet. My husband was boiling over. I stroked his hand and Mil arrived to cool him down. Understanding just how annoying she could be, I nodded as he apologized for what his sister had said about our son. Having taken enough from Kayla over the years, I was somewhat relieved that my husband stood up for me so publicly. He apologized to Jamie but totally ignored Kayla once he cooled off. That day following lunch, we returned to no interaction with Kayla. Her actions were impacting my husband in addition to me. We simply barred her from everything so she could get in touch with us. After lunch, Mil and Phil spoke with us and decided Kayla had gone too far this time. They could see how their usually quiet son had gone wild after Kayla had persisted in pushing him. We last spoke with her a year ago, and everything has been running without problems. 2 months ago I discovered what I was expecting. Given our lack of effort, this was quite unexpected. To welcome another family member makes my spouse and me blessed. We decided to let everyone know on my husband's birthday since we were waiting for the proper moment to do so. Wanting to honor Harry, Mil and Phil were throwing a great celebration in their lawn. Invited were our close friends and relatives. Sil chose to show her face after hearing about this from others. When we saw her, my husband and I staggered. Coming to hug Harry, Sil told him how much she had missed him and how sorry she was for their last talk. Taking my hand, my spouse advised his sister to be apologetic to me because she had pointed fingers at my character. Sil nodded, looked at me, then apologized. She informed me how she had been attending therapy for the previous few months and came to see how inappropriate it was for her to treat me like that. Though I disagreed with everything she said, I nodded as I wanted to be polite to her in front of everyone. Since this was a gathering for my husband, Mil and Fiel checked in on us and informed us that should we feel uncomfortable, they would kick her out as they had no knowledge she would be arriving. Harry, however, insisted on not creating a scene, hence we decided to leave this go. It seemed strange as Sil was laughing and socializing with everyone during the celebration. She mentioned visiting a therapist, so I wanted to provide her the benefit of the doubt even though she appeared overly optimistic, completely not her nature. Harry spoke movingly about how he thought he was the luckiest man on earth, appreciative of yet another year spent with a lady like me, when it came time to cut the cake. His remarks made me flush with delight. As we were when we first started dating all those years ago, I couldn't help but value the fact that my husband and I were still intensely in love. Then Harry and I made the decision to let everyone know some fantastic news. Grinning, we said we were having a baby and everyone paused to consider before yelling in delight. My mother rushed up to hug me and started to cry. As Phil saluted Harry and myself, tears streamed down his face. Everyone was eager to know whether we had chosen baby names and was clearly delighted for us. Sil was the one sore thumb that caught out. She seemed stunned. Her mood changed and she simply turned away from us, appearing irritated, so I assumed maybe she was processing things slowly. Though I was a little concerned, thinking she would ruin yet another party for us, I was sidetracked with other individuals approaching to chat. I got up to assist my in-laws carry lunch, but Rick and my parents begged me to stay seated, telling me I should not even move at this point. Sil approached me beaming as I was calmly waiting for my husband to bring me a meal. Lively saying that she personally wanted to offer me dinner, since she was so excited about my pregnancy, she handed me a dish. She even said as she passed me the plate about how she wanted to make it up to me for all the times she had been nasty to me in the past. I nodded and politely approved. She then turned to go. I was ready to start digging when I fortunately found she had put shrimp on my dish. I know I am quite allergic to shrimp, hence I was surprised Sil even brought me this. Disappointed, I shook my head and got up to get my own lunch. Jamie approached me at that point to wish well on my pregnancy. After a little conversation, he asked me why I hadn't been eating. Jamie reassured me not to worry and removed the dish from my hands after I pointed out how Sil had served me shrimp, probably by error. Since he enjoyed eating shrimp, he told me he could have this dish. I could buy a fresh plate for myself. I nodded, grinned, then turned aside. Jamie began to puke and retch across this dish 5 minutes later, not even 5. Concerned, everyone stopped eating and watched him stagger to get out of his seat. Concerned Harry and Kayla hurried towards him. Jamie gestured at his plate, then at his throat. Our eyes grew wide with amazement as we realized what he had eaten definitely made something wrong with him evident. Jamie passed out, then everyone gasped in amazement and worry. Kayla hurried over to examine his dish, and her eyes grew shocked. She turned to stare at me and inquired whether I had handed her husband my plate. I nodded. Someone called for an ambulance amid the tumult, and he was hurried to the hospital. Through all of this, Kayla was sobbing nonstop and was staring angrily at me. Jamie had been poisoned, we were told later on. Knowing that the plate belonged originally to me, I nearly passed out upon hearing this. Jamie consumed may have poisoned my baby and me. Not yet known to Harry, Mil, Fiel, or my parents is this. Since nobody knew what was in the food he consumed that had caused him to faint in this manner, the police were summoned to get evidence from it. Jamie is still in recovery in the hospital while I'm typing this. Kayla stayed with him overnight. Relatives calling to find out what happened to Jamie and who might have poisoned him have my husband and I fielding calls. What has transpired shakes Mil and Fiel. They are sleeping over at our house since they are terrified to return back to their house. Nobody knows what happened abruptly while everything was going so nicely. Tell everyone that the plate originally belonged to me and how Kayla had come and presented it to me makes me terribly afraid. Should this evolve into an inquiry, I will have to tell the cops the truth. Though most importantly I am now rather concerned about what my Sil could do to me, I feel quite awful about what has transpired. I don't want to be around her, nor can I bring my kids anywhere close to her as she obviously has no restraints about trying to poison me. I feel bad about handing Jamie my meal and maybe contaminating my bill. Update 1. Whoa, thanks for the thousands of comments on this post in just a few hours. I never would have guessed I could have received these many answers. I typed this earlier and had shaking hands. I haven't been able to sleep. Though what everyone says, I do feel somewhat accountable for the event involving my bill. I should have simply tossed the dish away. I'm not sure why I let him grab it from me. I keep crying about his future. Knowing something is awry, my hubby has been hovering close to me. Though he doesn't know what I know about his sister, he believes I'm only worried. I agree with the remarks saying I should get down and gently chat to everyone. Although I'm not sure if everyone will believe me, MIL and FIL do have security cameras set all around the house. Given that this birthday celebration took place in their backyard, I am confident they could check and confirm via their cameras that Kayla presented me the plate. I'll speak with everyone tonight then update. Update 2, we then chatted, and I am very happy to have the nicest in-laws on planet Earth. Mill and Phil are already staying over with us, so I sat down with Harry and them over dinner to let them know I had something crucial to share. I began by inhaling deeply, the weight of the circumstances slumping on my shoulders. Everyone gathered around. I related the birthday party's events, including how Sil had handed me a plate of prawns and Jamie had unintentionally consumed it, causing his sickness. Their shock and incredulity reflected my own as I spoke. Mill and Phil looked at each other, clearly worried. Harry's face transformed from uncertainty to rage. I went on expressing my concern about SIL's intentions and past attempts to hurt me. Faced with the possible repercussions for myself and our unborn kid, I hesitated to share this material. Being the pragmatic woman Mill is, she advised right away looking at the security camera tape. Given the gravity of the matter, FIL nodded in agreement. Though clearly offended, Harry stayed quiet to process the startling disclosure. Reviewing the security footage from their camera app, the truth was indisputable. The video shows SIL presenting to me the poisoned plate and then what happened to cause Jamie's suffering. The weight of the data made no space for uncertainty. As the knowledge sank in, emotions ran strong. Now totally aware of his sister's evil intentions, Harry battled to control his wrath. Their daughter's activities horrified Mill and Phil, who also found the extent she had gone to cause disturbance shocking. Stunned in silence, we tried to figure out why she would act in such a manner. Given this is a very serious issue, my in-laws have opted to forward this material to the police following this disclosure. Jamie is the one who has to lodge charges on Sil, hence FIL and my husband will be visiting and meeting him after he recovers. I want to cry every time I consider how I let Jamie have my poisoned dish. I have no idea how Jamie will react. I am very anxious about him, so I cannot eat anything right or sleep. I will let you know about anything noteworthy. Update 3. Alright lads, I'm back with an update at last. Although I know it has been a month since my previous update, right now I'm a pregnant woman experiencing a lot. First things first, she was detained after seeing the proof. My in-laws handed the recording to the police. Kayla admitted everything right away and did not even dispute the claims. She started crying. Jamie was as startled as any of us when my husband approached him about what had transpired. Tell him he would always be a part of our family regardless of what he decided to do. My husband advised him to press charges against his sister since this was such a wicked thing to do. Once Jamie recovered, he not only chose to prosecute charges but also sought divorce. Emotional and begging them to pardon her, Kayla called Mill and Phil. As it happens, Kayla is pregnant herself. She tried to control them by telling them they should do this for the benefit of their granddaughter, begging them to bail her out. Phil strongly advised her, nevertheless, that she should at last learn to own her acts and that they were done coddling her. Though Mill is quite depressed about what is happening to her daughter, she knows that her actions cannot be simply forgiven. The cops discovered proof she had tampered with the meal, meant to damage me, which backfired and resulted in injury to her husband. She has been charged with several offenses including risking life, causing damage, and tampering with food, thereby compromising integrity. Saying how this was all my fault anyhow, Kayla had been pleading Jamie not to charge her. Fortunately, Jamie's mind is set on punishing her. Her court hearing will begin shortly. I doubt she can flee this time. My son and I are doing okay, to everyone inquiring. In the meantime, about what his aunt has done, he is clueless. We want our son to know and avoid these circumstances, hence Harry and I have discussed and we do intend to sit down with him and tell him the truth. Having a difficult but absolutely vital conversation with a young child will be challenging but essential. As instructed by my doctor, I also get frequent ultrasounds for my pregnancy every 2 weeks. We want the kid to be a surprise, hence we do not intend to find out her gender. Knowing what has happened to Kayla, my parents have been somewhat protective of me. They are urging me to see treatment since they are concerned this could compromise my psychological well-being during the pregnancy. I agree with them as, while behaving normally, I have a deep-rooted phobia of what Kayla did to my meals and avoid eating any outside food or anything I have not made myself. Hopefully, my husband will help me to overcome this illogical phobia as he knows about it and supports me all through. Update 4. I last checked 8 months ago. Kayla is a prisoner right now. She came out guilty on the allegations. Though I never went to her court hearings, occasionally my in-laws would tell me how Kayla came clean to the court admitting years of jealousy of me. She had always dreamed of one of her best friends marrying my husband, hence when he started dating me, she would always try to harass me since she never wanted an outsider to marry her brother. She became jealous when we told my husband's birthday party we were expecting, as she was also going to reveal her pregnancy. She wanted to share her wonderful news since she had miscarried once, but she felt we stole her opportunity to shine. She became so enraged then, from her pregnancy hormones, mixed a little bit of rat poison with my supper. She said she wanted me to wind up in the hospital, but she never wanted to physically hurt the baby or myself. She said she deserved a reduced punishment as she never expected me to offer her husband my plate, and since I essentially poisoned her spouse. Of course, the judge answered her pleadings. She was put to prison and will be far from our life for some considerable while. Jamie is also at last free since she has also effectively divorced him. We have seen him over the months and keep including him into our family events whenever we can. He informed me that it was never my fault when we spoke, and I profusely apologized to him for handing my plate to him. Hearing that I had been rehearsing it over and over again in my thoughts, wishing I could have done things differently so he was never poisoned, I started to cry. That Jamie is doing well right now makes me happy. Regarding Harry and myself, our family now boasts a baby daughter. Our daughter's presence has warmed and lit our life despite the shadows of the past still there. Being a big brother makes our son Nate very happy, and he has been loving and caring toward his little sister. Seeing our kids connect makes us appreciate things. My parents and in-laws have been there for us all through, guiding us through this new phase of our life.